This episode is brought to you by the Money Together Couples Workshop. You may have heard a lot about homesteading, but what is it? How do you do it? And is it something for you? How does it affect your faith? Well, today you're going to learn all about that on the Catholic Money Show. Welcome to this episode of the Catholic Money Show. This is an episode that I have been looking forward to for quite a while. And I guess you only have to look forward to it for another minute or so, because we are going to get into an incredible interview with one of the authors of a heck of a book, The Liturgy of the Land, a Catholic Homestead. Wow, what a book. I mean, I've got a backyard. We grow a couple things maybe, but this is so fascinating. Incredible, beautiful pictures. Wow. It really gets you thinking. So I'm happy. I've got my list of questions and I'm ready to get them answered from one of the authors himself, joining us from a small dairy farm in Western North Carolina. He is the co-founder of Fraternus, founding editor of Sword and Spade magazine, and author of multiple books, not just Liturgy of the Land, but a few others. He has a master's degree from the Augustine Institute, and if you get him talking, he might just claim that his family invented bourbon. Welcome to the Catholic Money Show, Jason Craig.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure thing. It's a pleasure to have you. And I guess before we get any further, did your family invent bourbon?
Yeah. What's funny about having that in your bio is that if you go on a podcast, it's going to be the first question. No matter, I'm going to write more books maybe. My ancestor is Elijah Craig. We are directly related. He was an illegal preacher, back when in the United States, you had to have a license with essentially the state church. We have this illusion that we're completely free all the time in religion. Whether it was accidental or on purpose, was one of the fathers of bourbon. And I found that out from my aunt, who was doing one of these deep dives, and she was not excited about that fact. She's, a little more Puritan, and she's a Protestant, not a Catholic. I was excited, and I have been plastering it on my bio since then. So there's some debate on where exactly bourbon came from, but let's just say yes. And so you're welcome for bourbon.
Thank you. Yes, and absolutely thank you. That's great. Well, the other thing to say thank you about is, and I really do mean it, this book is really cool. So we live in Nebraska, but definitely in Omaha, suburban for sure. Though we are on the edge of town, so we can see, the fields still, and, there's the dirt road next to our development until it got paved and all that. So we can see it from here, though cannot participate. And not even on the level of chickens or anything because of the dreaded HOA. So it's a thing we've thought about. Oh, we'll get some land. I mean, I feel like everybody thought about getting some land in the last few years. So it was certainly something I'm certainly interested in, but it goes through. There's so many just, beautiful pictures. If you are watching this, beautiful pictures. It really goes through so much of it there with the cow. There you are.
My girl.
So yeah, it's an incredible, because it's not just like, oh yeah, get some land, but it goes into why it, and I'll say you make a pretty convincing case that getting some land and homesteading is an incredible way for a family to live.
I think I would defend your impulse that I think, well, you said it, every family is going to have the moment. Maybe we should live on a farm. Like, I think every family, especially the dads, I think moms too, but for different reasons, they're going to ask that question, and there's a good reason to ask it. And the book was meant to be sort of defend that impulse, augment the question to, an argument why it might be good, but also the cautionary tale that this is going to require, this is more of a conversion. It is a different way of life. And there are degrees to it. Everyone does not need to, pull up their anchor and go and sail to different oceans. It's not necessarily what you should do. And there's a lot of people that can pursue homesteading for the sake of their family and do harm to their family without proper discernment and guidance.
So as we jump into this, tell me more or explain more of what homesteading is. When you say those words, what does it mean when you say homesteading?
Sure. So I'm trying not to use the word farming too much, because a lot of times people will dismiss this idea. Maybe they grew up on the farm. Like, you don't even know what you're talking about. You gentlemen, armchair farmers, you have no idea how hard the stress, how to do it. And when I say homesteading, I am not talking about making an income from the land, right? And that, just to defend that, it's a very important point. We live in a consumerist society, right, where an experience isn't real unless you bought the t-shirt. That something is not made authentic because you're making income from it. Okay. There are a lot of wonderful things that are free or that don't make money, but are very much real. So when I say homesteading, what I'm referring to is basically domestic production. That in the book, which you've read through, hopefully, some of it at least, that
Yes.
the spectrum we're talking about is the suburb where you are and the homestead. And that's the spectrum. And we're not insulting the suburb to point out that the economic model of the suburb is consuming. It exists as a consuming unit in a consumer society. It's literally like what our modern economy is built on, that you go somewhere, you make money, and you bring it to this place to consume it, or Amazon brings it to you for consumption. In other words, it does not produce anything. I mean, it doesn't. The highest level of production, most suburban homes, is just the act of cooking, right? That actually, at least you're bringing some work to the, and then keeping it clean and stuff. But homestead is simply a place where you are growing, making, or, and oftentimes fixing things. So it's that could be a huge spectrum. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, I think, or maybe we're talking about that later, like, making sourdough bread. That's a pretty homesteady thing. It's not necessary. You can go purchase bread, but is there a value in going through the process and recovering the art of making the bread, right? And so homesteading to different degrees is just going backwards. And we have in the book different sort of degrees on the spectrum of where people might land.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere from somebody, I have a friend who is what I would describe as a full-time homesteader, right? So he, off of like 2 acres, grows all his food. I mean, he has to purchase very little things. He doesn't have a full-time job. He just has a couple part-time gigs he does here and there. You're always going to need money. You're going to need money. Or somebody who is just, in your case, your HOA, maybe they'll let you have 1 tomato plant, well, you're doing it. You're producing something. And the argument in the book is that people will dismiss this as impractical or romantic. And one, that's dumb, because growing tomato out of soil isn't practical. I don't understand what the word practical means. And as far as romantic, of course, romantic things are romantic. It is good. And the reason we would recover it is that the act of making bread, maybe there's a value in it that we've lost. If all we're doing is making money and purchasing, maybe there is a value in making things so that we don't have to purchase that we've missed. Maybe there's parts of life that we're missing out because we're not. And the argument in that book is that we're missing out as a family, that the natural state of a household is not consuming. The natural state of a household is production. Eve was given to Adam as a helpmate to do something, not just companionship. Right. So that the family is meant for more than just mutual support of individuals.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. You said it's in the book somewhere. It was like, yeah. It's become pretty popular. There's a lot going on. Maybe there's a little bit of romanticizing going on, but it is pretty romantic. Like, there's a reason it's attractive, because it's a pretty neat thing. Yeah, you mentioned here in here you have the 4 scenarios, right? The backyard gardener, the hobby homesteader, the sideline supplementer, and the full-time homesteader. That, we don't all have to move out into the country and all that. Yeah, I guess I'll ask now. Maybe I didn't read the introduction or something carefully enough, but why do you call it a liturgy of the land when you're talking about homesteading? I noticed that phrase is getting used, throughout the book, kind of not necessarily in, what would you call it? In replacement, with homesteading, but oftentimes it'll come up kind of like that. So how did that phrase come about, and why do you see that it is so applicable?
Sure. Well, I mean, the word liturgy, refers to work, right? The work of people, right? That's what it means. And sort of analogously, the way Saint Bernard says, to read the book of God, you have to read the book of nature. That there are things that God communicates to himself, about himself through nature, and there is not another means to receive that truth, right? It's just that is the way it arrives. Um, and so analogously, we have the liturgy of the church, we have the mass, we have the office, and it teaches us. And then because it's from God, it's mostly scripture offered back to God in prayer, right? And the sacraments provided to us, offered to God, the Holy Eucharist provided for us, offered back to God. And that the land has a liturgy as well. And that the liturgy of the church and the liturgy of the land, they're very much intertwined. And in fact, at the beginning of the book, I quote St. Augustine, who talks about why he actually didn't like the use of some words to describe worship. I believe it was liturgy, because for culture, of cultivating, because that word can be used to describe either the worship of God or the working of the earth, right? So for the homesteader, though, we cannot separate, or for every Catholic, we cannot separate our bodies and our souls. What our bodies are doing is a prayer or not, very often. And when you're working the land, it has its own rhythm, it has its seasons, and they go beautifully with the church's seasons, in that it is a work. And so it is a liturgy. It's a liturgy of the land, and it does teach us. We do learn about God, and it is offered in worship. And we as man, because we have bodies and souls, we are the only creatures, so different from the angels, who they can't have their hands in the soil. They don't have hands, right? We're different from the beasts, the animals. They can't have their minds and hearts in heaven because they don't have souls like we do. We are the only creature that can have our hands in the soil and our mind in heaven at the same time, and by working with the liturgy of the land, I'm talking about the seasons, the rhythm, the work itself, that it is an offering to God, right? So it's very closely to our understanding of worship, that we know this from, the Benedictine mottos to just the constant teaching of the church, that our work is a prayer. And when your work is close to creation, that veil between God and you, it gets thinner. It's easier to receive. We're both, I have an office job. I'm on a computer. I don't see God, his waves through the depth of my spreadsheets, but I do see him when I'm outside, right? I see in the soil, I sense him in a way that is different.
When in the book, and you mentioned it even in this interview so far, that this turn to homesteading is a conversion. Can you tell me a little bit about your own agrarian conversion?
Yeah. Well, the reason we use that in the book a lot, and is because we have, on the other side of the accusation, well, that's romantic, that's nonsense. We've moved beyond these kind of things. We've evolved, we've progressed beyond the need for us to indulge our fancy, desires with the drudgery of farming and dressing up and, blah, blah, all that stuff. The other side of it is a lack of awareness of how much we are formed by a world ruled by money, consumerism, materialism, and a void of God. And we think, well, we'll just go to a homestead and those things will go away. But they don't, because we're there, and then we find out we're the problem. So when I say conversion, that's a little bit of a cautionary, that this is not a technical skill that you need to pick up. It actually will change your heart and your mind, and you will have to operate. And if you're not willing or able, because there's some people, it's no choice of their own, right? Their spouse is not on board. They don't want to go buy land. They hate chickens, or they've got student loan debt that they'll never escape, and they can't afford any change, I have to take care of a sick. There's all sorts of reasons you're not able to do it or you
Hmm.
can't do it. But if you can, the conversion I'm posing is that you don't, when you're a fish, you don't know you're in water. And sometimes if we are going to romanticize it in a negative way, we think, well, once I'm on the land, all these problems will be fixed. And that's not true. So the way you approach creation, the way you approach your family, the way you approach your time, the way you approach a lot of that's going to change. And it's just a matter of you changing, because it is a difference. The more you're homesteading, the more of a conversion. If presuming you didn't grow up, you just grew up completely artificial. You're surrounded by artificial everything. You've never been outside of air conditioning, and all you know is hyper controlled organized sports, and your achievement and meritocracy, and all of a sudden you're bought a bunch of pigs and you don't know how to keep them in the fence, and one of them died. You're gonna it's gonna require conversion. So, but your follow up with my own is that I think that is the reason we wrote the book, is because my co-author Tommy Van Horn and I, we both started homesteading. We did not grow up farming or homesteading. We started about around 2012, both of us at the same time. We've stayed in touch, kept notes together. He went into full-time beekeeping. I'm still on that chart. I'd be a sideline supplementer, right? For us, our homesteading is no longer optional. Our economic makeup, we need the food we grow at this point. We got 8 kids and we need the food. And it's our way of life. We're in. We've been converted. We've drank the Kool-Aid. That being said, in those times, in that 12, 13 years, we've seen a lot of other families attempt it as well. And I can say I've seen more failure than success. And I have had to have my own, conversions. So if the reason there's failure it's not just because there's something wrong. I think it's actually a failure of conversion sometimes, right? Or people did not know what would be asked of them, or they were presumptive and prideful in that. I've developed a saying now that when I first started farming and I was meet old farmers, they think nobody can do it. And young people, younger, zealous families or whatever, they think anyone can do it. So it's probably somewhere in the middle. And the difference is about conversion. Am I willing to actually be changed? The way if you pray the liturgy consistently, it changes you. If you live the liturgy of the land, there's a change. And if I'm not willing, and as an example, on those 4 quadrants that you read, as I call them the quadrants, or the spectrum, if it's very important to you that your daughter is a, leading role ballerina, and that's an important thing to you, then you should probably not live 45 minutes outside of town, you know.
Yeah.
But if you really want your way of life to be shaped primarily through the shared work of a homestead, then you can. And that's not a matter of like sinful conversion or something. It's just like, what are you actually asking of yourself, of your family? If your kids are 14 years old and they're pretty ingrained in that local school, you're probably not going to yank them out and move 45 minutes outside of town, right? That's going to be difficult. So that's what the book is for, is a little bit of promote what is very good and natural and why it is a good response to today's chaos in the world. Homesteading is a good response. Are you willing to be changed by it? And then make sure that you discern carefully what you're actually doing so that you don't harm your family in the name of, trying to do something good.
You'd mentioned you using the word artificial and artificially and everything. I thought it was very interesting in the book. You brought up about how a lot of times, maybe these days we can use that to talk about, fake or kind of, just phony. But really it's that it was made by man, right? We have art and there's artifacts. So artificials is kind of a man-made quality to things. And then when we are in whether you call it, urban life or suburban life or modern life, it is more artificial. There's more things that are man-made instead of the natural world, right? I mean, I grew up in southern Pennsylvania, so lots of, still, suburbs, but, a lot of dairy farms around and all that. I've lived in Vermont. I've lived in New York City, right in Manhattan. I've lived out in Champaign, Illinois, where once you get out of town, there's not much else. They've got some farms, and now here in Nebraska, like I have seen and experienced, right, like almost entirely artificial surroundings and then very natural ones. Or, just going out on hikes or going into the mountains or on our, camping trips. And I gotta say, I don't know, there's something there. There's something about just that natural world. It is, yeah, that the veil gets thinner. I don't know where it was in here. I'm pretty sure maybe it was a quote from somebody else that you guys incorporate, but it was about how when we're in nature or the natural world, we can encounter the one who created it. And then when we are in a more artificial place, when we're in the cities or whatever, well, we are encountering the one who made that, but it's ourselves. So it's not quite as a satisfying encounter. And maybe that is a bit of the stirring in the heart that people have felt towards something, and I guess you'd call it a little more real, that comes along with homesteading, whether that's, entirely out on the land or doing whatever it is that you can where you are. Yeah, anything else on just that stirring that people have experienced that is leading them to doing this? Or I
Yeah.
guess you said you didn't grow up doing it. How did you first see that stirring in your own heart or in the heart of your family and choose to pursue it?
Yeah. So there's a lot of issues you're bringing up or touching on there. I mean, the reason for a family and somewhat that the artificial economy that we live in, which is, we talk about in the book, the difference between a natural economy and an artificial economy. That artificial economy is predominantly about money, and money is an artificial construct of value, meaning made by man, right? Money was not created on the eighth day. Money was created by man as value. And it's a tool. All tools are artificial. This house, I'm surrounded. A house is artificial, made by man. It does not grow from on the side of a tree. You have to cut down a tree to make it. Which we're not creatures, so we can't find caves and holes and things. This is what we do. We make stuff because we're like God. We're co-created with God. We make stuff. However, the more you make a world that is man-made, right? So the more you're surrounded by what man has made, then by definition, the less you're surrounded by things God has made. And it makes man louder than God in a lot of instances. So an author that's very influential on me is John Senior, and he talked a lot about, the need of Catholic realism. Perhaps he's controversial, comments that he's not sure Catholic culture can exist with artificial lighting because we don't have a world with shadows and there's no darkness, and we lose what the sense of darkness is, and we, all this stuff. Now, I happen to know John Senior also had electric lighting, so he's just observing things. So without trying to feel, people would say, well, you're a fraud. I mean, you're talking on a laptop, you've got your Britney Spears microphone on. So what we're trying to point out is actually just saying this is having an effect on us. To live in a world completely artificial has an effect. So, Thomas Aquinas has really great teaching. I think you've touched on this on your show sometimes, that an artificial economy has an effect on a society. If a society is built around speculation instead of producing, then that changes the nature and the dynamic of how we think about money and how we treat money and how we treat work and how we treat one another. So to your point, a lot of people are, the artificial, of course, that word has gotten more play than ever lately, the whole AI, artificial intelligence thing, which, by the way, I would say is a contradiction. There's no such thing as artificial intelligence. There's artificial and there's intelligence. Intelligence is created by God. Whatever that thing is created by man is not right. God's not going to speak through that. Not to mention, not to say he can't. Anyway, let's not get sidetracked. But to live in a world completely cut off from creation and the rhythms, it's going to have an effect because God did not intend us to live like that. That we are, it is only made possible because of how removed we are from creation and how disembodied we view the world, to act as if this is even possible. But we think about ourselves as separate from the earth, separate from creation. But this is our habitat too. It was made for us to dwell in and on and with. We're not separate. I have no desire to colonize Mars. I know exactly where God intended us to live, right? And it's Earth, and we have a relationship to Earth, but we actually think of ourselves as if we don't. And that's part of the problem. You conceive of yourself as not having a relationship with nature. You do have a relationship with nature. You do have a relationship to food. You do have a relationship to farming. It's just too distant. It's so distant to the point where people actually say things, well, that's not practical.
This is a perfect time to take a little break and tell you about our Money Together Couples Workshop. This is an incredible program that Amanda and I have created to help you get on the same page with your finances, with your spouse. It's perfect for engaged couples, newlyweds, anyone who feels like they could be a little bit closer in how they see money with their spouse. You are going to discover how you see money, how your spouse sees money. Then you are going to look into the future, see where you guys want to go, then make that plan for getting to that future from the present. Man and I are there to walk you through all of the exercises, and you can watch it anytime on demand. From now through Valentine's Day, you can get this workshop for half off. Just use promo code VALENTINE when you check out. Head on over to walletwin.com/moneytogether to sign up now. And don't forget to use code VALENTINE to get half off. That's code VALENTINE at walletwin.com/moneytogether. That's walletwin.com/moneytogether. Use code VALENTINE.
Or they'll say, we're not an agrarian system. We're not a society that needs that. I'm like, well, you eat every day, and therefore you have a relationship to the land. It's just really far away, right? It's just far away. And the argument is, and that's not good for us, that there are things that we only learn by proximity to creation, and that God did not put us in creation to escape from it. Right? He put us in creation to learn from it and to learn ultimately about him from it. And if you're only surrounded by, if you are 100% on screens and the temperature around you is constantly, 72 degrees, and you're surrounded by polyester and fluorescent lighting, it's going to have an effect on your soul. Actually. And it's a bad effect. It's a negative effect, right? We know this is bad for us. Fluorescent lighting and screens and all this stuff is physically bad for us, but also spiritually bad for us. Now, it's not to say we can't use it as a tool, like the artificial tool of money. We can make a use of it, but it is bad when the relationships that are part of being human are distant. Your relationship to God, your relationship to other people, to man, and your relationship to creation. They should be as close as God wanted them to be, and anything that keeps you or divides you from them should be healed in some way.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know if that is.
It was great. I liked it. Yeah, you'd mentioned, something that comes up, I think, a lot in the book is an idea that I was running into probably beginning, it was 2 years ago or so, but about just the very nature of the tools we use does something to us, does something to our culture and our society. You'd mentioned, I recognize the name of Neil Postman. You're talking about the, clocks and how they were, created by monks to help, pray the liturgy of the hours and bring us closer to God, right? To keep our minds on eternity. And they've kind of been taken out of that context and are now used to probably separate us from eternity and to just, work. But so when I've started falling into, I've read a couple of his books and some other folks like that, and just this idea of like, just stop and think about what it is you're doing and just what message is also being talked about there. I think maybe the easiest way of maybe the most accessible way I ran into this, especially at the beginning, was, we've got, Instagram, or we have our smartphones with us. And so now, instead of seeing something, we've inadvertently or, unconsciously trained ourselves not just to see something, but to see and then think, how could I frame this? What would be a good shot here? How could I make it look a little bit better? How could I say, how could I take a picture of this? Instead of like, wow, it's really pretty. Let me look at that for a little bit. and think about it
Not
and then
real
try to
until I
remember it.
snap a picture. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And that's just kind of this consequence of this thing that just makes it easier to take pictures or to share pictures or to see them or whatever it is that we don't necessarily think about when we are, buying a phone or signing up for an account or anything like that. And so that's happening all around us, right? For one way or the other in our more modern industrialized society or on the homestead. So talking about that, right? You mentioned in the book Neil Postman. You mentioned earlier John Senior. As I was going through, I was trying to take because again, when you're reading this thing, I mean, it's not till, and it is a very healthy appendix, I think is what you call it, yeah, of like the practicals at the end, and not to say the beginning is impractical, but there's a lot of just like, I don't know, it just makes you think about how you're living life and what it means to be living your life and all that. So I was trying to take down, I'm like, okay, again, I've heard this name a couple times. Let me write that one down to see, I want to read that guy's stuff or whatever. So I got, John Senior, Wendell Berry's mentioned a lot, Hilaire. What are these other kind of these outside, I don't know, thinkers, philosophers, poets, whoever they are, who maybe help one shape a homesteading outlook on life?
Sure. I think and I mean, not to you just list them all out. I'm thinking about them. They are probably in the genre of like realism, which is true, honest observation about the world, the makeup of the world, and what it's doing to us. Because a lot of this presumption that we all have of ourselves, or assumption or delusion, is that we are objective thinkers, that we are making decisions based on our reason, and we're reasonable people. And the reality is you are being constructed by the world that's constructed around you. Something is happening to you. And we are safe now. A lot of people have had a hard time doing this. We are safe to give a firm critique about the way we're living now, even though we have material abundance and relative security, because we're spiritually unhealthy and we're manifestly unhappy, right? This is so kind of in my day job, it's with fraternities, we deal with, the fatherless epidemic and the loneliness of men, kind of the male issues. And, one stat that I know, it's just fascinating to me, is that young men have grown unhappier every decade since they started measuring, happiness in whatever ways they do. They've grown more depressed. So we're free to ask how are we being formed? Because a lot of us are scared to ask the question because it requires probably conversion or ways that we're contributing. And we kind of, because we're consumers and we're a consumer society, we want to solve all of our problems with just purchasing or branding ourselves something different, right? But actually comes down to like, I am unable to be, and back to the realism thing, I'm unable to be truly just present in the world and have my eyes opened. So Joseph Pieper is an important author. I think I quote him in there, but he's what
Yeah.
you were just, you made me think of him, that leisure is the basis of culture is one of his more famous books in his proposals, which is your ability to sit and wonder and see the wholeness of reality and just be able to, like, as we say, take it in, which is not really what you're doing. You're receiving it in, is the source of true culture, happiness, humanity. And we're not able to do that. Anyone who's would argue with me, I'm like, you're delusional. I mean, that we are not capable in the world that we're formed in. We have to work to have that kind of leisure because we're being shaped and formed. So all those authors together, I mean, anybody who's familiar with them, you're going to know they have a pretty healthy skepticism about the modern technocratic or technocracy, as Neil Postman calls it. Definitely that our current constructs are the delusion of progress, which is our current, like all of the good things are a natural outcome of organic evolutionary improvement of humanity's lot. They're not our decisions. It just happened to us because we're constantly improving and growing up, which, absolves us from any responsibility. That our current economic makeup is not okay. That you cannot separate your soul from your economics, that you're not allowed to just pursue money and use it by any means necessary without an effect on your soul. They would Wendellberry, Chesterton, Belloc, those guys would definitely point out that we have destroyed local community and local bonds in the name of a giant, increasingly mass culture, a cosmopolitan disconnect from any kind of place, unrootedness. By the way, if you're a Catholic and you can't, if you're not rooted, you can't have tradition. You can't have custom. You can't have like all the things that really make us who we are. You can't have them if we're all, as Wendellberry would say, if we're all just cohabitating with one another. We don't really belong to one another. So anyway, I don't know all those authors you mentioned, I love all of them. They're very good, but they have a healthy skepticism of what technology and the advancements of technology has done for us, which a lot of people are not willing to do because, come on, it's amazing. And you're using it. You've got air conditioning. You can't critique it. They're willing to critique it because they're willing to say what it's doing to them, right, in their community and their family and their soul. So a healthy skepticism of it, and then definitely just a broad recommendation that you cannot be disconnected from the natural order of things without dire effect. So, Chesterton was no farmer. Wendellberry is, he's still alive, but they all know that society always is agrarian. We're meant to be agrarian. I mean, that's a natural state. We can't not be agrarian because we have bodies that need to be fed and they're fed from the soil. The problem is we've lost it as a dominant cultural shared way of life. I mean, the United States was 98% farmers in the 1800s, and now it's less than 1%. That can't happen without changing what your society is.
So I'm hearing this stuff. I'm reading the book, all these things. I'm just like, man. And I know you say it in the book. You said it already. I mean, it was probably one of the first things out of your mouth in this interview. Not that it's not for everybody, but like, it's not for everybody. You don't have to live on a homestead, live off the land, or go to hell. But boy, it's like, that does sound good, or I want those things, or, I'm looking through, what is it, when you're going through the four, or leading into the four different, the scenarios or whatever. And it's like, well, let's like kind of look through a couple of these things, and it's just like, culture integrated, of integrated work and time together. Well, you're going to have more of it at the homestead. It's like, well, I want more of that. Culture formed by working the seasons. It's like, well, I want more of that. Household needs supplied from the land, or investment of the whole household. It's like, well, I want those things. Those all sound good. And maybe this is just the sign that it's time to get some land for me. But when I hear it, it's like, okay, how would one not want to go do this? Right?
Let me answer.
Like
let's stop there. Let's stop. I mean, I think, yes, the argument at the beginning of the book is that the natural state of the family is the homestead. But that's actually where we belong by nature. If you don't agree with me, buy the book, buy two of them, and don't share. But because I think that's in our tradition. That's an observable reality. Let's not defend this. Let's just say that's the state. But we're not there. We're not on a society where everyone can presume that to be true. For a long time, everyone would have presumed that would not have been. That was like the most obvious thing you could say. And I do argue then the next argument, though, is that in a natural economy, there's an integration of things. Doesn't mean everyone is farming, but everyone has a connection to the natural economy, the trade and the making of things. And that the next natural state of the family is to be productive, that the family is better when it's a producing unit. So that is something a lot of people are not aware of, that, there was a one time, and this was an intentional act of both government and business to move households away from productivity, because the style of economy based on, sort of the tax farm that we are now requires income producing, consuming households, that our economy is built on that. That is not an outcome of organic economic freedom and the freedom of the markets. That's not how that happened. That was an intentional act in an intentional direction of economic policy. That was a big change from sort of Jeffersonian agrarian ideals of the early United States. So that's the next thing, is that everyone didn't have to be farmers, but it is normal for families to make stuff together. That's what families do. I mean, we at this point, we only think of families as, a sort of mutually enriching web of relationships within a home where you live together and maybe eat together. Before, the family would understand, there was a reason, of course, Jesus would have been known as a carpenter because his father was. Like families did stuff together, like made that was their work, like their father's business. I must be about my father's business, his work. But then, so towards the end of it, though, there are some reasons. Well, maybe you are. And I don't want to limit God, right, and bring about. But I'm saying it's a tall order to live in this economy. I mean, you're like, "Oh, maybe we should get some land." Okay, well, go see how much it costs and see if you can't find some barriers really
Uh-huh.
quick. And there was a time where people farmed because they couldn't afford to do anything else. Well, now they farm because they can't afford it. I mean, it's a bizarre historical
Mhm.
situation we live in, and then there are people that because you actually what you really want is to maintain your current lifestyle, but on the land. Well, so a lot of people say, "Well, I want to start a farm." Great. Are you willing to live in a single wide trailer on borrowed land? Like, no. Okay. I just want to know where you are because you could start farming tomorrow. If we started on a homestead. We lived in we bartered for where we lived on someone else's place. It was a very run. It was a shack. It's safe to say it's a
Mhm.
shack. And we lived there. We loved it. We cut our teeth on that. We didn't love everything about it, but and you're married. So what your wife, your spouse, and your children think about this, because if you drag them all out there and they resent you for the next 15 years, well, that's not going to make for a peaceful place. So there are a lot of, and we put those in there. Hopefully to ask people like, all right, where, what is reasonable? So I'm saying, yes, I think it is a good impulse. I think it's a good thing worth pursuing within the realism of your economic makeup, because prudence, prudence is never an individual virtue, right? It always
Mhm.
requires the consideration of your family, your community. So say you're very important part of your suburban parent's life. And like you moving would have an effect on the community in a negative sense. That's actually worth taking in consideration. That
Yeah.
I don't want to harm anybody. I want to do the least amount of harm possible. But for us, we decided, and our kids were young enough, and it was like, we cannot live in the city anymore. I can't take the social, cultural, the spiritual state of the city. I can't take I'm tired of the billboards. I'm tired of the rat race. I'm tired of the speed. I'm tired of the noise. I'm tired of I can't see the stars. Like, for us, it just was like we have to go, and because we were on the same page, and the paradox of being able to have a remote job. Some people can, some people can't. Just a lot of those things align, and it's not been easy for us. But that's that conversion. A lot of things that are hard are good for you. Anyway, that there are reasons not to. So I'm like, that's why the book is doing to you what we hoped it would, which is there are really good reasons why you desire this. And there's really good reasons in our current state of things to really discern this carefully.
Mhm. For those who can't, for whatever reasons, how is it just like, all right, well, as best you can, like have a garden? Is it possible for someone who lives in an apartment in Manhattan to in some way homestead or have like a homesteading mentality in how they live?
So the magazine I edit, Sword and Spade magazine, my co-editor is a mechanic in city. Now, when I say he's a mechanic, he owns a mechanic shop. Very well read, but very much in the throes. I would actually argue with Wendell Berry that the place where you live is important. So I'm not opposed. So just so you know, the city is much closer in alignment to a natural economy than the suburb. So the
Mm.
suburb exists completely artificially.
It is artificial, yes.
It is not a human arrangement that is possible outside of ours
Hmm.
and an artificial economy. As a There's a reason that man never before now, cities, villages did not look like suburbs. I mean, the entire
Hmm.
model of them is an artificial construct. And there's a downside to that, which is why a lot of the newer suburbs are trying to pretend to be villages, Hart Square Village, Creek, whatever stupid names, something Haven, Commons of Village Green Meadows. So the city is actually closer to a natural economy in that you are surrounded by man, which man is good. and that the integration of your economic is closer. So your local grocer, you're walking to the library, you're encountering persons that are making, fixing, doing things. You likely you might even be able to work near people you live with. And so it's actually a lot more like a homestead. So you're likely to have more connection already. So if you're in the city, I would say, no, don't read my book. I mean, maybe read some Wendell Berry books about the importance of local economy and local community, and integrate and be a part of that and wake up to that and maybe unplug from the artificial, you know, maybe stop with the DoorDash and, walk down to the place yourself. Probably just get rid of your phone. If you lived in a city, if you got rid of your phone, you lived in a city, you'd be a better agrarian than a lot of agrarians. And that's why I brought up my mechanic friend, because his insights, having working with people and working with his family in this multi-generational mechanic shop, a lot of what he embodies in it and lives is what people are actually after when they're homesteading, which is not just getting dirty with some tomatoes. It actually, what we really want is God and others. 'Cause the reason, so Father, when you ask a dad, why do you want to homestead? I want to work with my family, right? Because in his job, a lot of times he doesn't get to. And it is normal and natural for a family. This our Lord says, I want to be about our Father's business. So dad wants to work with his son, and the son wants to work with his father. And a lot of times the reason we're homesteading is because that's what we want to do. So somebody in the city they can do that. I mean, they can have the shop where they live upstairs and work downstairs, and they can produce. It's much more of a challenge in the suburb, because your social arrangement is by definition temporary. I mean, very rarely are you in a home in the suburb and you think, this is a multi-generation forever home. It's kind of like everyone is a little bit, which is different from like old world neighborhoods that they were arranged differently. The modern suburb is kind of by definition transient. The people you live with, you have no dependency on them. You have no need for one another. So it makes community very difficult. People think community is built on sociability and friendship. It's actually built around solving problems together and needing one another. That's what brings stability to a community. Stability is created by need, right? I need these people, and that's not utilitarian use. That's normal. It's good to need one another. So the suburban community is much harder because everyone is there by complete freedom of choice. All their everything social about their lives is by effort and intentionality. There's nothing binding to it the way an economic, binding makes something. I have a neighbor. He's a Catholic friend. He's a butcher. Melvin Hill Meats. You guys look him up and buy some meat. You can order meat from him. He quit a job in banking and started a butcher shop, but our works are not intertwined, but we have a tractor that we share, and we need it. We have need. I have a dairy farm. I got to move these giant hay bales around. He's got to bury guts from dead cows. I keep cows alive on my side of the road. He keeps them dead over there. But we share, so that we have need for one another. We're mutually invested in this thing, and I actually graze my cows on his land, and I have to be careful about that, to care for his land and not abuse that. And so that's what I mean. I'm sorry, that the answer. So the city's probably actually it's easier. It's going to be harder in the suburb.
So those of us stuck in the suburbs,
I didn't mean to make you feel that way.
No, that's great. What can we do? Is it, and I don't think so, but is it, like getting dirty with tomatoes as much as you can? Like, what is it? If I can't, what do you do if you are stuck in the suburbs? Yeah. How do it's like, man, I want to, if there are people who want to do this, but it's like, for whatever reasons, and we mentioned a lot of them, can't, go all in or whatever. How, even just staying where one is in the suburbs, like, how can one homestead and live the liturgy of the land?
Sure. Well, we do provide in the back a lot of different enterprises, right? When it comes to like, all right, I got to grow something. I've heard enough of this. I heard this guy, and hey, the great thing about failing at homesteading is that failure is compost. If your tomato plant dies, just compost it, put it back in the soil. You're fine. You've improved. Your failure has improved the soil. You're good. There are some other things like, well, that was expensive and now they're all dead, like bees. I mean, I just spent $700 on all this equipment and I hate bees and I'm allergic, and they all swarmed and left anyway as punks. But we do have in the back of the book, like a rating of sort
Yeah.
of economic viability of these things. When we say economics, we need for your household. So instead of, it's not what can you make money from it, but like, what does it demand of your family? What is the return on this? How long term? So for example, we have milk cows and pigs. That's like our main thing, and chickens, kind of, but the milk cows and the pigs are like our main source of food. And, but you can have a pig for 6 months and raise it from piglet to butchering weight and be done. And then you had 6 months of experience. You got 300 pounds of meat, or not that much, but 200 pounds of meat, and you're done. And it was a great experience. And we're never going to do it again because that pig tore up my fence. And, versus a milk cow, you're going to milk that thing every day, twice a day, forever. I mean, until you get rid of it. So it doesn't end. So there's a lot of different enterprise. So we rate them in the back if you wanted to do something agrarian. As far as philosophically, though, if you're, stuck in the suburbs, is to recognize that you're still stuck there with other souls. And that I think trying to bind yourself in community and recognize that loving your neighbor is not a complicated commandment. Because I think that the end result of homesteading is the glory of, well, when we talk about Catholic homesteading, the glory of God, the good of our families, and the good of our community, right? Like in that order. So you can do all those things in the suburb, but they're harder. I'm just going to argue. I would argue they're more difficult because they require so much effort. Put your effort there, belonging to people. But within your home, I strongly suggest, I know this is a stretch in our imagination, but I think we need to recognize it has not been good for us as a family, as an institution of the family, which is a divine institution, to not have anything to make together. So I think doing work together, like where the suburb pulls you away from that, like the height of like suburban achievement is actually to do like nothing, not even cut your own grass.
Mm.
Like do the work of your household together, because that's the best of life. Is especially as men, we we take care of each other practically. Like, so if you're not going to grow food, at least cut your own grass. If you're cutting your own grass, do it with your family and teach the skills and fix a car in the garage. Pick up. I think the closest thing to homesteading that we enjoy as a family that's not homesteader is music. We play, we make, right? Because if you're not making your music, that's why you have to buy it. That's why you have to stream it, because you're incapable of producing this human good yourself. And things change when you're producing it. It's a freedom to be able to say the power's out and we have music, right? And we can make this ourselves and we're enjoying doing it together. So music, art, food, these things are all integrated because this is what humans do. So if you're in the suburbs, do what humans do. Humans are not
Mm.
meant to just be able to afford everything that they need. They're meant to be a part of making it. That's like the work is good, right? Jesus says, my father's been working from the beginning and I must be about that work, so do some work together. I think don't, don't just leave. Like, all right, what are we going to do today? Like if you're in the suburb, what are we going to do today? Probably also means where are we going to go today? Right. So maybe stay home and make something together.
That's great. Yeah. Do what humans do. I love it. I heartily recommend people pick up a copy of the Liturgy of the Land. If that's whetting their appetite, or listening to you today, where can they find out more? Where can they see,
Sure.
read, hear, etc., more of your work?
You can go to liturgyoftheland.com and sign up for the newsletter there. We had a conference and we're going to make some of those materials available. There are some other books forthcoming of Liturgy of the Land. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to announce it, but there you go. And then Sword and Spade magazine, if you want to stay in touch, not specifically a homesteading magazine, but we touch on these things a lot. We have mechanics and theologians and farmers and computer salesmen. And so it's a great magazine geared primarily towards men and fathers, but completely accessible and worth edifying for the rest of the household too. So swordandspade.com, Liturgy of the Land, wherever you land, it'll be fine. We'll stay in touch.
Perfect. We'll put links to those in the description or the show notes. Thank you for sitting down with us, taking a little bit of time out. I thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you. And again, thank you so much for taking some time. Thank you for writing this book and helping the rest of us do what people do. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And until next time, bye for now. This episode was sponsored by the Money Together Couples Workshop. Don't forget to use code Valentine at walletwin.com/moneytogether to get half off through Valentine's Day. That's walletwin.com/moneytogether.